So negative 5, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an endpoint. And our midpoint is going to be at a negative 10, 6. So a negative, something's not right. Figure it out. So this is our endpoint. Our midpoint's going to be negative 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is our midpoint. Negative 10, negative 6. That's why. Negative 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, guys. On the struggle bus today. Something's still not right in our answer. But, so to get from here to here, I would count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to make that right triangle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I went up 10 and over 5. And since this is the midpoint, I'm going to go down 10. 10 and over 5. And this should be our opposite endpoint. And that is 15. So this should be 15 and negative a lot. 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16. So negative 15, negative 16. I'm not sure where I'm at that wrong. Oh, I know where it went wrong. The midpoint Y, this should be a negative 10. Because that's the midpoint X. I didn't set it up right at all. So let's try this one more time just so you can see if you wanted to do it algebraically. This is why I typically do it graphically. So the outer two are your midpoint. So the Y value, this is going to become a negative 6. This is going to become a negative 10. Your endpoint is what goes in here. So this negative 5, this is a positive 4. With that said, we're going to multiply by 2, and I'm going to do it really quick just so you can see. And I apologize for not working this before we started our class so I could work out my kinks. And then again, so this is negative 12 equals 4 plus Y. You guys are understanding which way everything goes. So if I get for Y, I'm going to subtract 4, and that's going to give me a negative 16 for my Y value. And then I'm going to add 5, which gives me that negative 15 for my X value. Negative 15, negative 16 as my coordinate, which is what we found when we graphed it. So perfect example of where if you do it algebraically, really check and make sure your midpoint is on the outside and your endpoint is on the inside, and you're putting things in the right spot. Because like I said, I obviously just messed that up. But you always have the option to graph it endpoint to midpoint. You're basically finding that distance, or if you want to call it the large rise to run, and then just doing it the opposite direction. Make sure you're labeling your midpoint so that way you don't accidentally go find another endpoint using the given endpoint as the midpoint. All right, so we're going to do the next one. So hopefully this will help. So again, our midpoint X, then X plus X over 2. Midpoint Y, Y plus Y over 2. This is my midpoint, so I'm going to use it first. This is my X value, so I'm going to put 5 equals. This is my Y value, so I'm going to put negative 3 equals. 2, we're missing an X, and we're missing a Y for sure. So then I'm going to take my X value, which is at negative 8, and then my Y value, which is that positive 8, and now I need to solve it. Is everybody okay with what I just did right there, in case I rocked your world on the last one? Okay, perfect. So you have 2 in the basement again, so we're going to multiply both sides by 2. And that's going to give you negative 6 equals Y plus 8, because that gets the 2 out of the denominator. If I do the same thing over here, because that's the inverse of division, we get 10 equals X minus 8. So now I'm going to ask you again, to solve for x on this side, what am I going to do to solve for x? Add 8. Good. Don't forget, I got to hear from you guys to give you credit for being here. Okay. And then for the y, how am I going to move that 8? Because these are nothing I'm asking right this question should all of you not be able to answer at this point. Good. So we're going to subtract 8. Subtract 8. And negative 6 and negative 8 is going to give me what? Yep, negative 14. Good. So then our endpoint would be 18, negative 14, y. I'm sorry, your x value would be 18, and your y value should be a negative 14, algebraically. Again, do you guys want to see it graphed, or are you happy with the math way, and you understand how to graph them? All right, so the next question, this is an EOC release style question. The vertices of a rectangle are located at 1, 2, so that's over 1, up 2. We'll call this A. Then 5, 0, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll call that B. 2, negative 6, 1, 2, so left, right first, and then down 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll call that C. And then the last one is negative 2, so that's the left 2 and down 4. And we'll call that D. Now, this is a rectangle. And they want to know what the area of the rectangle is. How do we find area of a rectangle? What is area of a rectangle? Yep. So length times width. So we need, probably, you can visually see that this side is one of the sides. We call it the width. And then we need the length, right? You can use the coordinates and use distance formula, or we can use Pythagorean theorem. So if I make C to B and turn this into a right triangle, so you have to use the lines on the graph. So you're using the straight lines on the graph. You're like, if you looked at this as a map, you're traveling along the roads, not cutting through any yards. And then this is going to be our right angle, and this is our right triangle. So if I called this X, how far is it from X to B? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this side is 6 tall. 1, 2, 3, and 3 wide. So since this is a right triangle, can anybody remember which formula we're going to use to find the length of the hypotenuse? Or in this case, side BC. Maybe. So it's triangle. We're just looking at this. We're going to multiply in a minute, but we have to have the lengths first. So it's called Pythagorean theorem. Do you remember what Pythagorean theorem is? Anybody? All right, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, because I have a and I have b and I'm looking for c, because c would be your hypotenuse, right? So it's 3 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. C squared is always going to be the hypotenuse, right? Always, always, always. So whatever's opposite the 90 degrees has to be the c. The a and the b can mix up. Yep, so it's going to be 9 plus 36 equals c squared, which is, what is 9 plus 36? $45 equals c squared. So we're going to find the square root of that. And the square root of 45 is not a nice, neat number. So we're going to leave that as a square root of 45 for right now, because this will definitely be a calculator active question. So we can use the square root bar. Now we're going to do the same thing for AB. So I'm going to count up 1, 2, because I made that up line. I'm going to go from A to B using the roads. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a 4 by 2. So then that's going to be a squared, which you can use 4 or 2 in a, plus b squared equals c squared. So what's 4 squared? And what's 2 squared? There we go. 4 squared. 4. Because 2 times 2 is 4. And that's not because of the 2 at the top. That's because squaring anything means 2 times its number times itself. Equals c squared. So that's going to give us 20 equals c squared. We're going to take the square root. And we're going to keep it because that's another ugly guy. So the length times width, because that means we can call this the length and this the width. Our answer choices are looking ugly. I copied this from somewhere else. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're going to keep going. So square root of 45 times the square root of 20, and we're going to plug that in our calculators. Square root of 45 times the square root of 20. And what did you guys get? Yep. It's going to be 30. Indeed, indeed. It is 30. It looked like it was going to come out really nasty. Just in case you were curious, the square root of 45 is 6.7 in all those decimals. The square root of 20 would be 4 point in all those decimals. So had we gone through and rounded this, we would have not gotten such a nice, neat number. So that's one of the reasons that if it's not a perfect square root, you're going to likely have your calculator or Desmos accessibility. So I would just leave it as an ugly square root rather than leaving it up for you to round by accident the wrong way or not round to what they tell you to or any of that fun stuff. So just use it as is and it'll be super accurate. All right, I have a triangle with the vertices of 1, 4. So I'm going to go over 1, up 4. We'll call it A again. And then over 3, up 4. And then over 3, up 6. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we have our vertices. What is the midpoint of the longest side? I think we actually already did this one. How would I find the midpoint of the longest side? So we did A, B, C. Looking at it, what do you think is the longest side? Hopefully we see that this is a 90-degree angle. Is it AC, AB, or BC, the longest side? So we always want to name sides with 2 letters, but because of the where I wrote it, I understand. I think you mean the hypotenuse, right? This side is the longest side. So again, we're going to turn it into a triangle on the outside if you want, or if you realize this is a perfectly right triangle. This is a 2 by 2, right? So it's going to be 2 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared, and that'll give us the distance, or that is not what it's asking for. Scratch that. We're looking for our midpoint. So we have A to C. A is 1, 4. C is 3, 6. So if it's up 2 over 1, then half of it will be up 1 over 1. So it would be right here. That's 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks like the midpoint is going to be a 2, 5. If we stack these, add them, then divide by 2, because that's midpoint, that's going to give me 2, 5. Or if you use the true formula like we used before, remember it's x plus x over 2, y plus y over 2 will give us those midpoint coordinates. So x plus x, so 1 plus 3 divided by 2, and then y plus y, 4 plus 6 divided by 2 is where they got that 2, 5 from as well. I just like to stack them so, as you already tell, I don't accidentally mix up which numbers I'm using where. All right, the larger leg of a right triangle is 8, and the shorter leg is 6. So 8 6, and then the other guy is going to be hypotenuse because it says right triangle. What is the length of the hypotenuse? So I'm going to give you a minute to try this guy and chime in. So again, it's a right triangle. It's just like we were doing above, but there's just not a graph. You're looking for the length of the hypotenuse. And so I'm going to slide mine down, and I'm going to work it down here so then we can compare our answers. And so you're working this guy, a leg at 8 and a leg at 6. Anybody getting an answer? Do we set it up like this? 8 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared? Anybody else? Good. Because 8 times 8 is 64. 6 times 6 is 36. And 64 plus 36 gives us 100. Take the square root. That's going to be 10. Hey, trick question. Every time I take the square root, how many answers do I have? Algebraically, is that positive? Yeah, we have 2, right? Because the square root of 100 is actually positive 10 and negative 10. But negative 10 can't be the length, so we just disregard it. Because negative 10 times negative 10 also gives us 100. And remember, square root of c squared is c, because it's asking, what do I multiply by itself to get whatever's up here? So that's 10 times 10 gives me 100. So the square root of c squared, or like I saw some questions, the square root of x squared is the letter. Square root gets rid of squaring anything. Because c times c is c squared. Just like 10 times 10 is 10 squared, which is 100, right? Just as one more call out about some questions I saw in some of the things I was grading earlier today from last week. All right, this is an EOC release question straight from the packet. The point S is the midpoint of QP. If I were you, if this is not drawn for you, I would draw it on your paper, and I would put a midpoint right here. So that means I know that this is equivalent to this, because midpoint means it falls right in the middle. The point R is the midpoint of SP. So this guy is also a midpoint of here to here. If Q is located at negative 4, 8, and P is located at 8, negative 12, what are the coordinates of R? You want to try it? And then we'll talk about it. I'll give you 2 minutes to try it. Hopefully we did Q and P together to get the midpoint S, because you need this one to be able to get to the next guy. So we found the midpoint of PQ, which is S. And now I have P and S, and I need to find the midpoint of theirs. All right, anybody got an answer? So now I need to find the midpoint of P and M, or P and S, I'm sorry, P and S. And then so I had P and S, because P is 8, negative 12. And S is 2, negative 2, right? Because we got that here. So this is QP, so we had to find S first. That's 2, negative 2. Now we're finding the midpoint of P and S. We're going to add straight down, so 8 plus 2 is 10. Negative 12 and negative 2 is negative 14. Then we're going to divide both those by 2, and you should get 5, negative 7. Talk to me. What do I need to be able to do some more of to help with this? I think I would tell you the midpoint formula. I would only use it if you're missing the endpoint. I would stack, add, divide by 2 if you're looking for the midpoint. I feel that in my soul, ma'am. Miss Maddie, I feel it in my soul. All right, circle has a diameter with endpoints at negative 4, positive 4. So we're going to go to the left 4 and then up 4. That's our negative 4, positive 4. And then we have positive 2, negative 3 for our other one. Now that's the diameter. What is the length of the radius? Now, what do we know about the relationship of a diameter and a radius? If this is a diameter and this is some sort of circle, good, bad, or indifferent if it's ugly, but we know this is a circle going around here. What do we know about a radius relative to the diameter? If I know how long the diameter is, can I tell how long the radius is? Yes, good, it's half. So I can figure out the length of the diameter, and you can either do it by the distance formula, or again, we can turn this into a right triangle. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 up, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across to find the length of the diameter. So again, since this is a right triangle, what are we going to use to find the length of this diameter, which is the hypotenuse? We're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Yep, perfect. So we're going to do 7 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. What's 7 times 7? And what's 6 times 6? Good. And if we add those together, what are we going to get? 85 square root. So it's the square root of 85, right? So we can look at what that looks like, but I'm going to bet that's an ugly number. It's a big, nasty, long decimal of 9.2 point. We can call it 9.22. So if we half that, you could half it there. But if I also found my midpoint, so negative 4, 4, and 2, negative 3, so stack them, add them, divide by 2. That means our midpoint is at negative 1.5, right? So negative 1 up 0.5. So this is our midpoint. So if I wanted to use these coordinates, I went up 1, 2, 3.5. And then I went over 1, 2, 3, which is also half of that 7 and half of that 6. So 3.5 squared plus 3 squared might give us an easier, whichever fits better in your brain. And that's 12.25. Add that to 9 is 21.25. And then we take the square root of that, and it's going to be 4.61, which 9.22 divided by 2 is 4.61 as well. So you could get there either way. Okay, both of those, but again, they don't have to be beautiful. They will not always be perfect. Use your calculator. The cool part is when they're not beautiful and perfect, you have a calculator. Pay attention to rounding. If the number is 5 or above, you round up. All right?